Three-piece, I remember when I first started following you for cool vintage JDM wheels and now you're making truck content. What the f happened? Well, trucks are cool as shit and we all started buying and modifying them ourselves, and then we were like, you know what? Let's just make truck content and sell truck wheels so we can pay for our trucks, and here we are. That's kind of how that happened. Anyway, now that's out of the way, today we're talking about the best wheels and tires for your NNBS, what's with these names, Silverado or Sierra. Let's get right into it and help you figure out what fits. Before we get into the juicy fitment details, do me a favor, drop a comment down below with what car or truck we should do a fitment guide on next, and if you have one of these trucks, add it to our gallery using the link in the description to be one of the first trucks and be in our fitment battles next month. So you got an NNBS truck and you're looking for a fresh set of wheels. Your options really depend on what you want to do with it. Most of the time these trucks go up, leveling or lift kits are the norm. However, there's also a percentage of owners who like to lower them. Whether you want to lift it, lower it, or leave it stock, we included a bit of everything in this wheel and tire fitment guide. Starting off with the basic fitment info, regardless of what direction you go with your truck, here's some basic information that's going to stay consistent and help you buy the right wheels and tires. Lug pattern is a 6x139.7, the thread is an M14x1.5, the centerboard is 78.1, and the torque is 140 foot-pounds. Holy shit, that's a lot of torque. Now, I know that most of you are going to lift your trucks, but one of the big problems on these chassis is clearance. You want to make sure that your wheel and tires are going to clear. Lifted trucks and lowered trucks have their own set of issues. We're going to address them individually down below. But one of the things we want to talk about first is how you can gain a bit of clearance without cutting just by using a hammer. Chevy is notorious for extra stout wheel wells, so you'll need a big-ass hammer. A proper NorCal mod involves cutting, grinding, and pounding. The goal is to gain room for the shoulder of the tire without making it obvious that you took an angle grinder to it. It's a three-step cutting process after the truck has been put on stance or a lift, wheels removed, and fender liners tucked back, and I'm going to tell you a very, very quick and dirty version of how this works, which is also in our fitment guide, which is linked down below. First, cut a pizza shape out of the inner fenders, take 1 to 2 inches off the sharp edge of the pinch weld, grind the sharp edges smooth like my brain, paint, then pound the bottom area of the pinch weld smooth with the inner fenders. You gotta really pound them. Gotta pound it! Finish off with more paint or underliner to prevent rust, and the bottommost screw of the fender liners is replaced with a self-tapper. Done correctly, everything should look like factory once the liners are reinstalled. A quick note on trimming for clearance. Of the fitment examples we will show, most of them require some kind of cutting the inner fender. How you achieve that is entirely your call. The front bumper can also be trimmed for additional clearance. This is a much easier process as it involves just cutting an angle or radiusing the bottom of the bumper. We'll go into more detail on the mods that are needed per application. Again, if you jack your truck up high enough, trimming might not be needed. This is also true if you want to go for an OEM Plus look on factory suspension. This is the first category we're going to be taking a look at. So what can you do at stock ride height? Well, if you use your truck for hauling and you don't want to sink a ton of money into fancy suspension, you could always leave the suspension stock. You might be asking, well, what's the largest tire I can fit on stock suspension? Some claim 33s. This is internet bullshit as usual, as 33s can be difficult even with a leveling or lift kit. Reality is something around 32.5 inches is as large as it's going to get on factory suspension. For reference, the Z71 comes with about 31.5 inch tires. Now this one's sitting on stock 18s with 275 Falken Wildpeak AT3, which are awesome tires by the way. It's not much larger than stock, only about half an inch, but 275/65 is about as large as you can go on stock suspension without needing to cut or trim. This 2018 Z71 has unmodded fenders and stock suspension. A 285/65 is going to fit but will take some trimming. Even then, it might rub if you're doing aggressive off-roading. Now unfortunately, these are the limitations of stock suspension. If you want to run something more aggressive, continue to the leveling and lift section. However, next up still on stock suspension, we're going to be talking about a badass set of wheels, this 2017 Silverado on Volk Racing TE37s in 18x9+0 with factory Goodyear Wrangler 265/65 18s. Even with more aggressive spec'd wheels, there's zero rubbing. The wheels are half an inch wider with a zero offset, bringing them close to flush, which is a great look for stock height trucks. What's interesting here is that the owner chose TE37 progressive wheels, which are high PCD equivalent to the normal TEs. Volk also makes the TE37 XT, an off-road specific version. These wheels look really good on a truck that sees some trail use, as we see here, but also on sport trucks, as Colorado owners have shown. Now getting into leveling and lifted NNBS trucks, new possibilities open up with a leveling kit. These come in all sizes, but 2 inches brings the truck almost perfectly level. Rough Country is a popular choice here, but there are a lot of brands to choose from. For example, Ready Lift MotoFab BDS suspension, and many, many more, which you can pick up right on threepiece.us. Leveling allows you to run lower offset wheels and larger tires. Depending on the exact configuration, you might be able to run a 33 or larger tire. Keep watching to see some examples that I'm going to get into later. If you want to take it a step further than this, you could lift your truck. This is the most comfortable way to get 33 to 35 inch tires to fit. Now, depending on the lift kit, it's also possible to fit 35s in there on your half-ton truck, which fill out the fender arches perfectly. With 2 inches of leveling, this 2016 Z71 is able to run tires just under 34 inches. This one's running Nitto Recon grapplers in 295/60/20 on some fuel lockdowns. With only leveling, this is going to require some modification to the fenders, which you're going to notice is a trend on this body style truck. The wheels have lower offset than stock, but nothing crazy low offset or excessively wide wheels, which are more likely to cause rubbing issues. A tire somewhere in the ballpark of 33 to 33.5 inches is going to fit without much drama. Now, this 2013 1500 has Mammoth Vex wheels in a 17x9 -6. It looks slightly tucked because it is fitted with fender flares. Now, the issue with these flares is that they do make another point for the tires to rub. As I said previously, 17 is the smallest wheel you can fit on the 2nd and 3rd gen. If you want to maximize tire sidewall, 17s are the only way. 285/70s are a great option for off-roading or cities with cratered deep potholes. Now, 6 inches of lift is when you can start to consider a 35-inch tire. These 325/60/20s are actually a bit over 35-inch. The wheels are pretty wide, and when combined with negative offset fuel hostage wheels, 6 inches of lift is required here. This truck looks like it needed the front bumper trimmed and probably a NorCal mod as well, and the reality is low offset wheels with thick tires are going to do that. Now, referring back to our guide of every type of wheel fitment, we did talk about keeping wheel poke proportional to the truck of the height. Wider the wheel, higher the truck. Here's a good example. If you want to run 22x12 Vision rocker wheels with a -51 offset, as seen on this Sierra 1500, better jack it the f up. This truck is lifted 7.5 inches, and even with this lift, the fenders needed to be trimmed slightly. Even though it might require less trimming for wheel clearance, getting these lift kits installed takes a lot of cutting out in and of itself. This one required notching at the frame, control arms, etc. just to fit the lift kit, which again is a common theme when you get to those big lifts. Now, getting into some lowered trucks. Most of the time these trucks are lifted, but there are some Silverado owners that do enjoy lowered trucks. You might see them either at your local takeover. Just kidding, love you guys. It makes sense with these half tons. They're LS powered after all. And if you're looking to build a sport truck, there are 2 options: reverse leveling or full-on lowering kits, of which we have an example of each coming up for you. Now, bear in mind, rubbing is equally, if not more of an issue depending on the wheel and tire setup on a lowered truck. You might not rub the front bumper or splitter, but you're going to find new problem areas such as the fender liners and suspension, typical problems for lowered cars as well, which carry over to truck. Now, reverse leveling is something common on these and refers to lowering the rear to match the front. Like regular leveling, it's cost effective and doesn't require extensive modification. This 2018 Silverado has 2-inch drop shackles in the rear with the blocks removed, bringing it perfectly level when unloaded. Removing the rake puts the truck level, and the same happens when you throw an engine for your non-running project car into the bed of your truck, so that might be a cheaper solution depending on your project car's timeline. The problem with lowering the rear is your truck's going to have that Carolina squat when it's loaded up. For example, when you use your truck as a truck, which most of you don't do, you just flex it on the gram, so there you go. To retain functionality, the owner of this Silverado made a custom airbag setup for the rear, allowing it to be load leveled, which is pretty cool. These tires are about 1/2 inch smaller than factory, and at this ride height, there's no rubbing or scrubbing. None, not at all. Not a surprise, considering the front is at stock ride height. This one's sitting on some super cool 1552 Turbomac HDs in 20x9 -12, wrapped up in Nitto 420s, nice, 285/50/20. If you want to slam your truck, you're going to need to lower the front and the rear, like this 2014 Z71 owner did, which is on a 4 and 6 inch drop kit. Besides needing to spend a few $1,000s on lowering parts, there's a lot of work involved. Notching the frame for drive shaft clearance, relocating brake lines, drive shaft and differential work, but if you put in the work, it looks super clean like this truck does. Like the last one, the tires come out to around 1/2 inch smaller than OEM, meaning this truck needed the fender liners deleted and still rubs here and there, but it does look sick on some 22x10 Cosmis XT206R wheels. Bringing it all back together in this video, we covered as many use cases for your truck as possible: lowered, lifted, on-road, off-road. The one thing that we're missing here is a super sick slam single cab truck. We love single cab short beds. They look awesome, and especially with these LS trucks with a fat turbo setup lowered on some welds. If you have one of those or any Silverado, feel free to upload it to our gallery. We'd love to see some slam trucks or really any trucks in there. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll be sure to see you in the next one.